have noticed something subtle lately. Not a dramatic change, not a sudden realization, but a quiet sense that certain things are repeating. Conversations, thoughts, moments of attention. Not in a way that feels alarming, more like a gentle pattern coming into focus. This isn't something that demands action. It doesn't ask you to believe anything. It simply invites you to notice. When people talk about patterns, they often mean something obvious, something that can be pointed to and named quickly. But most patterns don't work like that. They move slowly. They reveal themselves only when you stop trying to label them. You might be listening to this, not because you searched for it intensely, but because it appeared at the right moment in your attention. That alone is worth observing without attaching meaning to it. You are not being singled out here. There's nothing rare or elevated about noticing patterns. Humans are pattern recognition systems by nature. Every day, your mind filters enormous amounts of information, deciding what matters and what fades into the background. Most of this happens automatically. Occasionally, something slips through that filter and lingers a little longer. That's usually where awareness begins, not with certainty, but with mild curiosity. Consider how often you notice the same idea from different sources in a short span of time. A phrase you hear twice, a question that keeps returning, a topic that seems to follow you without effort. This doesn't mean anything extraordinary is happening. It means your attention has aligned with a thread that was already present. Patterns don't appear because of you. You appear within them. One way to think about observation is to imagine standing near a river. The water is always moving. You didn't cause it to flow, and you don't need to stop it to understand it. You simply watch long enough to notice when it speeds up, where it slows, where objects tend to collect. Awareness works the same way. When you stop forcing interpretation, patterns become easier to see. Frequency, in this context, doesn't need to be mysterious. It can be understood as repetition over time. How often something appears in your awareness. How consistently a thought returns. How regularly a feeling passes through. High frequency doesn't mean importance. Low frequency doesn't mean insignificance. It simply describes presence. Most people assume awareness is something you turn on, like a switch. In reality, it's more like adjusting focus. Nothing new is added. The background just becomes clearer. When you begin to notice patterns, it's not because reality changed, it's because your attention did. You may recognize this in small, ordinary ways. Noticing how your energy changes at certain times of day. Realizing which environments make you more attentive and which ones quietly drain you. Observing how certain topics pull your focus effortlessly, while others require strain. None of this requires judgment. It's data, not direction. What often interrupts this process is the urge to conclude too quickly, to decide what a pattern means before it has finished showing itself. When you label too fast, you stop observing. The most stable understanding comes from letting things repeat without interference. There's a reason this feels calm rather than urgent. Patterns that matter don't rush. They don't announce themselves loudly. They don't demand belief. They simply remain consistent long enough to be noticed by anyone who's paying attention. You might be tempted to ask what you're supposed to do with this information. That question itself is part of the pattern. The mind looks for application, for outcome. But observation doesn't always lead to action. Sometimes it leads to clarity. Sometimes it just leads to better questions. Think about how often you've misunderstood something simply because you encountered it once. A single moment rarely tells the full story. Patterns require patience. They reveal structure, not instruction. Even this video exists as a pattern. Long-form content that doesn't rush, that doesn't push, that leaves space. If you're still listening, that says something about your tolerance for quiet information. Not better or worse, just descriptive. Over time, consistent observation tends to change how you relate to your thoughts. You may notice that not every thought needs engagement. Some repeat simply because they're familiar, not because they're true. Others return because they're unresolved. The difference becomes clearer when you stop reacting automatically. There's also a pattern in how people disengage. Most leave when they're told what to think. Some leave when nothing dramatic happens. A few stay because the lack of pressure feels stable. This isn't about keeping attention. It's about respecting it. If you reflect on moments when you felt most clear-headed, they were likely quiet. No strong emotion pulling you forward. No fear pushing you away. Just enough distance to see what was actually there. That state isn't rare. It's just often overlooked. Patterns don't require belief systems. They don't rely on optimism or pessimism. They exist whether or not you notice them. Observation simply reduces noise. At some point, you may realize that noticing patterns changes how you listen. You hear what's being said, but you also notice timing, repetition, absence. What isn't mentioned can be as informative as what is. This applies to conversations, media, even your own internal dialogue. Nothing here is asking you to adopt a new identity or perspective. You don't need to see yourself differently. You only need to allow information to arrive without immediately shaping it. If you continue observing, you may notice that clarity often feels incomplete, like understanding the outline of something without filling it in. That's not a flaw. That's the nature of observation. It keeps space open. Many people abandon this stage because it doesn't reward them quickly. There's no dramatic payoff, no sudden certainty. Just a gradual refinement of attention. But over time, that refinement changes how everything else is perceived. You're not expected to remember all of this. Patterns don't rely on memory. They rely on presence. If something here matters, it will return in another form. If it doesn't, it will fade naturally. Before this ends, it's worth acknowledging something simple. You chose to spend time listening rather than scrolling past. That choice doesn't elevate you, it just places you within a different rhythm, one that values continuity over interruption. If you find yourself returning to this channel, not out of habit, but out of quiet interest, that's another pattern worth noticing. Subscribing isn't a commitment to belief, it's just a way of keeping a thread available. There's no final conclusion here. Patterns don't end cleanly. They continue until attention moves elsewhere. For now, it's enough to notice that you're in one, and that noticing alone is sufficient.